a dark romance podcast written by Romance Podcast. They say every girl dreams of meeting a king. The crown, the castle, the fairy tale ending where the doors swing open and she walks into a life made of gold. And perhaps for most girls, that dream holds. Perhaps they get their prince and their palace and they're happily ever after. But Lyra Vance was not most girls, and the king she was about to meet was not the kind anyone dreamed about. Because in the fog-choked hollows of Appalachian country, where debts aren't written on paper but carved into tree bark with blades dipped in blood, kings don't wear crowns, they wear curses. And the castle waiting for Lyra at the top of Blackwood Mountain wasn't made of gold. It was made of silence and shadows and 300 years of screaming that no one outside its walls had ever heard. Now, before we go any further, I want you to pay attention to something. This story is going to flip everything you think you know about the monster and maiden trope completely on its head. Because what makes a real monster? Is it claws and fangs and a face that breaks your mind? Or is it a town full of ordinary people who pull a girl's name from a jar and exhale with relief because it isn't their daughter? Keep that question in your pocket. We're coming back to it. Lyra didn't know any of this yet. All she knew was that the blood covenant had come due, and the town had chosen her name, and in 6 hours she would climb into a black carriage and ride toward a man that the people of Oakhaven referred to only as him, never by name, never above a whisper, and never, ever after dark. But here's what Lyra also didn't know. What none of them knew. The thing waiting for her at the top of that mountain wasn't a monster who wanted to devour her. It was a man who had been devouring himself for 147 years. And the night she walked through his door would be the beginning of the end. Not of her life, but of a darkness so old it had forgotten what light looked like. That, at least, is what Lyra Vance had resigned herself to believe, that nothing could be worse than being sold. But fate has a way of proving us wrong. Because even now, behind the black walls of Blackwood Hall, something waits for her. Something broken, something ancient. Its eyes burn gold in the darkness, and when Lyra finally sees them, she will realize that being sold was nothing, compared to the terrifying world-shattering experience of being seen by something that has spent a century learning how to love in silence. Chapter 1. Lyra. Pack light, the letter had said. You won't need much. Lyra almost laughed at that. Won't need much. As if she owned much. As if a girl raised by a half-deaf grandmother in a house where the fireplace hadn't worked since October and dinner was whatever the mountain decided to give them had anything worth packing at all. She folded the honey-colored wool dress, the one Nana had knitted for her 17th birthday, 3 skeins of yarn traded for a week of mending the pastor's trousers, and placed it on top of the battered suitcase. Everything else fit underneath. A hairbrush missing half its bristles, a Bible with water damage and no revelations, 2 pairs of socks. That was it. That was everything Lyra Vance owned in the world, and it fit in a case she could carry with one hand. From the bedroom, the sound of Nana snoring, a soft, rattling sound that had been the soundtrack of Lyra's entire life. She crossed the hallway, bare feet silent on boards she'd memorized by creak, and stood in the doorway. Nana slept on her side, the way she always did, one hand tucked beneath the pillow as if holding something precious. The quilt, blue cornflowers hand-stitched, older than Lyra, had slipped to her waist. Lyra pulled it back up, tucking the edges the way Nana liked, tight enough to feel held. She smoothed the silver hair from Nana's forehead, memorized the landscape of wrinkles. The crooked bridge of her nose, broken years ago when she'd slipped on the porch ice and been too stubborn to let anyone set it properly. The thin lips that still murmured prayers in sleep. She didn't cry. She'd made that decision 3 weeks ago, the night Mayor Hargrove had pulled the Vance name from the lottery jar, with the solemn gravity of a man sentencing someone else's child to die, and the entire town meeting had exhaled with relief because it wasn't their daughter, wasn't their sister, was just the orphan girl with the deaf grandmother, the one nobody would fight for. And this is something worth sitting with for a moment. Because we've all seen this in real life, haven't we? Not blood covenants and cursed mountains, obviously, but the way communities sacrifice the person with the least power to protect. The foster kid who gets moved again so the biological children can have stability. The employee with no connections who gets laid off first. The psychology term for this is diffusion of responsibility. When a group collectively decides that someone else's suffering is an acceptable cost, as long as the cost isn't theirs. Oakhaven didn't need a monster on the mountain to be cruel. They managed that all on their own. Lyra had walked home that night through snow so thick it swallowed her footsteps, and she had decided, with the cold-eyed clarity of a girl who had already lost both parents before she could walk, that she would not waste a single tear on people who had never wasted one on her. She placed a folded note on the nightstand. The handwriting was steady. "I'm going so Oakhaven gets its spring. Don't come looking. There's nothing to find. I love you." Outside, the snow fell thick and silent, and at the gate, a black carriage waited like a hearse. Lyra picked up her suitcase, pulled on her boots, and walked out without looking back, because looking back was for people who believed they might return. And Lyra Vance had never been the kind of girl who lied to herself. Chapter 2. Lyra. The woman waiting inside Blackwood Hall had no eyes, not empty sockets, nothing so dramatic, just smooth skin where eyes should have been, as if whoever made her face had simply forgotten that feature, or decided against it. "Lyra Vance," the woman said, not a question. Yes, her voice came out smaller than she wanted. She tried again. "That's me. I'm Mrs. Ashworth. I manage the household." The woman's voice arrived like dry leaves across stone. "Follow me. The clock is unkind tonight." The hallway swallowed them. Ceilings too high, air too cold, the kind of darkness that doesn't just block light but actively resists it. Lyra's boots echoed on stone that hadn't been warm in centuries. "3 rules," Mrs. Ashworth said, her cane tapping in urgent rhythm. "Break one and I cannot help you." They turned a corner. Then another. The house seemed to rearrange itself around them. First, after midnight, do not leave your room. Not if you hear screaming. Not if you smell fire. Not if you hear your grandmother's voice calling from the hall. She paused. "It won't be her." Lyra's stomach dropped. "What will it be?" Mrs. Ashworth didn't answer that. "Second, your windows will be shuttered and locked. Don't open them. What happens outside those walls at night is not meant for human ears." They climbed a spiral staircase, the stone steps worn concave. How high were they going? Third. The cane stopped. The silence that followed was so complete, Lyra could hear her own heartbeat, each thump a small explosion. "He comes to your room at midnight. Every night. The lamp must be out. You close your eyes and you keep them closed. You do not look at him." "What happens if I look?" Mrs. Ashworth's eyeless face turned toward her with an accuracy that made Lyra's skin crawl. "Your mind unmakes itself," she said. "Not because he wants it to. Because what he becomes after midnight is something the human psyche cannot survive seeing. The last girl who looked, a maid, young and curious much like you, they found her the next morning with her fingernails embedded in her own face. She'd tried to claw out her eyes. The words settled over Lyra like a burial shroud. "She survived?" Lyra asked. "She breathes," Mrs. Ashworth corrected. "There is a difference. Now here's a fascinating detail that I think most listeners will miss on first pass. Mrs. Ashworth has no eyes. She is the one person in this entire estate who literally cannot look at Valerius, and that's precisely why she's still sane. She's not blind because of the curse. She chose blindness, or the curse chose her because she was already blind. Either way, the symbolism is razor sharp. The only person who can survive proximity to this man is someone who sees nothing at all. Remember that, because by the end of this story, someone is going to look at him with eyes wide open, and what happens next will change everything. The room at the top of the West Tower was small. A narrow bed, a wash basin, a wardrobe. One window, shuttered and bolted with iron so black it drank the candlelight. No mirror, no lock on the door. Mrs. Ashworth placed a tray of food on the bedside table. "Eat, you'll need your strength." She paused at the door. Something cracked in her composure, just for a second, just enough for Lyra to glimpse something underneath. Pity, maybe, or recognition. "If it helps," Mrs. Ashworth said quietly, "he is not what they told you he is." Then she was gone. Chapter 3. Lyra. The clock began to strike. 1, 2, 3. Lyra blew out the candle. 4, 5, 6. She lay down, pulled the sheet to her chin. 7, 8, 9. Closed her eyes. 10, 11, The temperature dropped so fast, her next breath turned to frost on her lips. The air thickened, pressing against her eardrums the way water presses when you sink too deep. 12. The door opened, not with a crash, not with violence. It opened the way a sigh escapes, slow, tired, inevitable. The hinges didn't creak, they groaned, a sound so low she felt it in her chest rather than heard it in her ears. Then footsteps. Heavy. Wrong. Each one accompanied by the scrape of something hard against stone, claws maybe, or hooves, she couldn't tell. And a secondary sound that made every hair on her body stand straight up. Breathing. Not breathing. Heaving. Ragged gasps dragged through a throat that wasn't designed for air anymore, followed by exhales that carried actual heat. A furnace blast that hit the exposed skin of her cheek and made her flinch. Then a sound split the darkness that Lyra would never forget as long as she lived. Wet. Organic. Deeply wrong. Bone separating from bone. The pop and grind of joints being wrenched apart, cartilage tearing, the sick, wet rip of flesh restructuring itself around a skeleton that shouldn't exist. It bypassed her ears entirely and arrived in her marrow, vibrating through her bones. Those aren't threats, she realized, and the realization nearly broke her. Those sounds are pain. Whatever is happening to him, it's agony. The present stopped beside her bed. A wall of heat on her left side, radiating from something massive and close and utterly still. She could feel its attention on her, the way you feel sunlight. Directional, specific, impossible to ignore. The breathing slowed, became almost contemplative. Something grazed the edge of her sheet near her shoulder, not a fingertip, something harder, sharper. A claw encased in what felt like stone. The contact lasted less than a second. Then it pulled away. She lay there. Minutes or hours, time lost its meaning in that darkness. Eventually, the heat withdrew. The footsteps scraped away. The door sighed shut. Lyra didn't open her eyes until dawn crept beneath the shutters. When she did, the room was empty, almost. Carved into the stone floor beside her bed, each letter gouged with the precision of a chisel. 4 words, "I will not hurt you." She pressed her finger into the groove of the Y. The stone was still warm. Chapter 4. Lyra. Morning brought answers she didn't want. Blackwood Hall by daylight was beautiful and grieving. Dusty banisters, crooked portraits, a dining table set for 30 gathering cobwebs like a bride gathering flowers. Grand but abandoned, like a cathedral that had forgotten its god. She was alone. Mrs. Ashworth appeared only for meals, vanishing before Lyra could ask a single question. No other servants showed themselves, though evidence of their existence appeared and disappeared like gifts from a ghost. A fire lit in a cold hearth, fresh water in the basin, her muddy boots cleaned and returned while she slept. It was in the second-floor corridor that she found the claw marks. Not scratches. Gouges. Deep parallel lines raked from shoulder height to the floor, the wood and stone ripped open the way a surgeon opens skin. She ran her fingertips along them, feeling the violence in each groove. They were everywhere. Door frames splintered. Walls cratered inward. And on the main staircase, the one she took each morning to the kitchen, where food always waited but a cook never appeared, she found blood. Not fresh. Dried to rust that flaked beneath her thumbnail, but not old either. It trailed down the stairs the way an injured animal drags itself, leaving smears where it collapsed and wider pools where it rested before forcing itself to keep going. He bleeds, she thought. Whatever he becomes, he bleeds from it. The thought lodged beneath her ribs and wouldn't move. That night, lying in darkness, eyes shut, listening to the horrible symphony of breaking bones and reshaping flesh, Lyra made a decision. She'd survived the first night. She would survive the second. And while she was surviving, she would pay attention. Because Mrs. Ashworth had said he is not what they told you, and Lyra had been lied to enough times in her life to recognize the truth hiding inside a warning. Chapter 5. Lyra. 17 nights passed before Lyra spoke. 17 nights of the same ritual. Door opens, footsteps approach, the transformation symphony tears through the darkness, then stillness. That massive, furnace-hot presence beside her bed, breathing its wrong breath, holding itself in check with a restraint she could practically taste in the air. Because that's what it was. Restraint. She understood that now. Whatever stood beside her wasn't losing control. It was fighting for it. The claws that sometimes grazed her sheet never pressed. The breathing that quickened against her neck always pulled back. The low growl that occasionally rumbled from somewhere deep in that reconstructed chest never became a roar. He was holding himself together every night, and it was costing him everything. On the 18th night, when the clock struck 12 and the door sighed open and the agonized footsteps scraped their way to her bedside, Lyra swallowed the fear that had become as familiar as her own pulse and whispered, "Does it hurt?" And this right here, is the moment the entire story pivots. Not the climax, not the curse breaking, this. 3 words in the dark from a girl who had every right to be terrified and chose empathy instead. Because think about what she's really asking. She's not asking, "What are you?" She's not asking, "Will you kill me?" She's asking, "Does it hurt?" Which means she's already decided that whatever is standing beside her bed is capable of suffering. She's already extended it personhood. And for a creature that hasn't been treated as a person in 147 years, that question is more powerful than any spell or sword. Silence, so complete she thought she'd imagined speaking. Then a sound, not a growl, not words, something between. A vibration she felt in her teeth and her chest and the soles of her feet. It bypassed her ears and arrived in her mind fully formed, a voice made of gravel and centuries. "Your curiosity will be your death sentence." She should have been terrified. Instead she said, "That's not a no." A pause. Then, impossibly, a sound she never expected from the darkness beside her bed. Something rough and broken and strangled, but unmistakably, undeniably a laugh. "Go to sleep, Lyra Vance." She didn't. Neither did he. Chapter 6. Lyra. The conversations grew the way ice melts, slowly at first, then all at once. He never spoke aloud. His voice arrived through what Lyra started calling the bond, the place where his thoughts pressed against hers like a palm against glass. At first his transmissions were clipped, guarded, a door cracked open just wide enough to confirm someone was home before slamming shut. "Don't wander the east wing. The floors are rotted. The kitchen garden still grows. Rosemary, thyme, help yourself. You hum when you read. Did you know that?" That last one arrived on a Tuesday while she was reading a water-damaged copy of Wuthering Heights in a library she'd found behind a faded tapestry. She startled so hard the book tumbled from her lap. "Where are you?" She pushed back, the way he'd taught her, like blowing on a dandelion, he'd said, and the image had been so unexpectedly gentle she'd cried. Close, always close, never visible. During daylight, Valerius existed as a draft that wasn't wind, a shadow that moved against the light, a chair still warm when she entered an empty room. She learned his patterns the way the blind learn furniture, by collision and memory. But at night, he was undeniably real. The transformation never softened. Each midnight brought the same symphony of restructured bone and torn flesh. But she grew accustomed to what came after, the heat beside her bed, the careful distance, and the conversations that unspooled in the dark. He told her about the mountains, how they looked before Oakhaven existed, when valleys ran thick with elk and rivers still had names in the old language. He told her about watching centuries pass through windows he could never open, forests shrinking, minds opening and closing like wounds, the town below always afraid of the mountain, always sending tributes of food and livestock, and every generation a girl. "How many?" Lyra asked one night. "Before me?" Silence. She counted breaths, 7, 8, 9, before his answer arrived, heavy with something she'd never heard in his voice. Shame. 12, over 3 centuries. What happened to them? They served 7 years. Then I returned them to the town with enough gold to live comfortably. A pause. None were harmed. None were touched. Another pause longer. None ever spoke to me. 12 women, 300 years, and not one had ever broken the silence. Not one had asked if he was in pain. Not one had treated him as anything but the monster they'd been warned about. "I'm sorry," Lyra said. "For what?" "That it took 12 tries before someone thought to ask your name." The warmth from his side of the room intensified, not threatening, but the kind that arrives when someone who has been freezing for a very long time is offered a blanket and doesn't know whether to accept it. "Valerius. My name is Valerius Blackwood." "Hi, Valerius." She smiled into the dark, knowing he could feel it through the bond. "I'm Lyra, but you already knew that." "I knew the name." "That is not the same as knowing the person." Chapter 7. Lyra. On a night she would later mark as the turning point, he reached for her. Not with violence, not with demand. A hand extended in darkness, and she felt it before she touched it. The displacement of air, the heat, the tremor running through it like current through water. Her fingers found his, and the contact jolted through her so hard she forgot to breathe. His hand was wrong. She knew that immediately. The skin was rough, not like calluses or labor, but like bark, like stone, something organic that had been replaced cell by cell with mineral. The fingers were too long, joints swollen and angular, and where nails should have been, she felt the curved edge of claws, blunt but present. She held on. Through the contact, his pain arrived, not as words but as experience. Centuries of nightly agony, a body torn apart and reassembled, bones broken and reformed, skin shed and regrown. The loneliness of watching the world through windows he could never open. The slow erosion of self that comes from being two things at once and fully neither. Tears slid down Lyra's cheeks, not from fear, from the sheer crushing weight of what he carried, transmitted through the place where their skin met. "How long?" she whispered. 147 years. She tightened her grip. His claws trembled against her palm. Neither of them let go. There's a concept in psychology called co-regulation. The idea that when two nervous systems connect, they can calm each other. A mother holding a screaming infant, a friend gripping your hand during a panic attack. Your heart rate sinks, your breathing slows. The terror doesn't disappear, but it becomes bearable because someone else is carrying half the weight. That is exactly what's happening in this moment. Lyra isn't healing Valerius. She's not fixing him. She's doing something far more radical. She's sharing the load. And for a man who has carried it alone for a century and a half, the simple act of someone reaching back might be the most devastating thing that's ever happened to him. Chapter 8. Lyra. She started leaving things for him, a sprig of rosemary on the floor beside his carved message. She woke to find it gone, and in its place a wildflower. Roots still attached, soil still clinging, not picked from a vase but pulled from the earth, as if whatever left it didn't understand the convention of cutting stems. She left a page torn from Wuthering Heights. He left a sheet of handwritten music, the notes precise and achingly sad. She left a square of bread with blackberry jam. He left a dead rabbit. Lyra stared at the rabbit for a long time. Neck broken cleanly, a single precise snap, no teeth marks, no blood, a hunter's kill. He's providing for me, she realized with a jolt that was part horror and part something warm she couldn't name, the way an animal provides for its mate. She cooked the rabbit. It was delicious. That night she told him, "Thank you for dinner." A long silence. Then, "You ate it?" "Should I not have?" The others screamed. Threw it from the window. The others didn't grow up in Oakhaven. We eat what the mountain gives or we don't eat. Another silence. Then a sensation through the bond she could only describe as sunrise. Warm, gradual, the emotional equivalent of a man remembering what it feels like to be understood. She reached for his hand. Found it. Rough stone skin, trembling claws, impossible heat. This time he reached back. Chapter 9. The Sin Eater. The girl is ruining him. Not metaphor. Not melodrama. The vessel called Valerius, who has endured a century and a half of nightly mutilation with the grim patience of a man who considers suffering his profession, is being taken apart by a girl who hums when she reads and held his monstrous hand in the dark as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She held his hand, the one with stone-black skin and claws and joints that bend wrong. Held it the way one holds something precious. The Sin Eater had gone still. Truly still, for the first time in 147 years, because she touched the vessel and did not recoil, because she wept, not for herself but for him. No offering of flesh has ever tasted like this. No terror, no guilt, no screaming confession from the village below has ever nourished the way her compassion does. She is dangerous, not because of the fire sleeping in her blood, the old keeper flame coiled at the base of her spine, the birthright she doesn't know she carries. She is dangerous because she makes the vessel want to be human, want to be free, want to be worthy of the warmth of her fingers against his ruined skin. And wanting is weakness. Wanting cracks the chains. Mine, the Sin Eater growls in the cavern of their shared skull. She is the key. Take her, drain her, be free. The vessel fights, wraps chains of will around the monster's throat. tightens until the darkness chokes. She is not yours, she is not mine. She belongs to herself, and I will die in this body before I let you touch her. The Sin Eater laughs. You say that now, but you grow weaker, and I grow stronger, and the girl, the beautiful stubborn girl, grows closer every night. Tick-tock, Valerius, tick-tock. Tock. Chapter 10. Lyra. She found the passage on a Thursday. Not deliberately, she'd been chasing a bat, an actual bat, small and panicked, ricocheting off the parlor ceiling like a leather pinball. She was trying to guide it toward a window, an exercise involving a lot of ducking, one overturned vase, and language Nana would have slapped her for. When the creature dove behind a tapestry and vanished, Lyra pulled back the fabric. Where solid walls should have been, a narrow doorway yawned into darkness. Stone steps spiraling down, worn smooth by centuries. She should have walked away. Mrs. Ashworth's 3 rules technically didn't cover exploring secret basements, but the spirit of the law probably frowned on it. She went anyway. She was a Vance, and Vances didn't walk away from open doors. That particular flaw, she reflected as she descended, had gotten her family into this mess in the first place. The passage opened into a chamber that stole her breath. Books, thousands of them, tens of thousands. Floor to ceiling, on carved oak shelves that stretched into shadows her candle couldn't reach. And in the center, on a reading table, a single journal bound in hide so dark it looked tanned in midnight. She opened it, read for hours, and the truth that emerged from those crumbling pages was so far from anything she'd expected that by the time she finished, her hands were shaking and her face was wet with tears she didn't remember shedding. The Sin Eater wasn't a demon. It wasn't a punishment from God. It was a psychic parasite born from the collective evil of the settlers who'd come to these mountains. Every act of theft, every violence against the land and its people, calcified over generations into something sentient, something that fed on human corruption and grew stronger with each new sin. And Valerius, the first Valerius, 23 years old, desperate and brilliant, had offered himself as its cage. Take me. Feed on my pain. Leave the people alone. The entity had agreed because a willing host was more sustaining than scattered victims. Every male Blackwood heir since then had inherited the curse. Valerius's father before him, she read about the night his mind broke, about how he'd walked into the forest in January, wearing nothing but a nightshirt and never came back. Valerius had been 19. He'd inherited a curse, the way other boys inherit farmland. And this is where the story quietly does something brilliant that I want to make sure you don't miss. Because this isn't just a fantasy curse. This is a metaphor for generational trauma, for the way damage gets passed down through bloodlines, the way a father's unresolved pain becomes the son's inheritance. Valerius didn't choose this curse. His father didn't choose it either. It was handed to them the way poverty is handed down, the way addiction is handed down, the way the consequences of one generation's choices become the next generation's cage. The Blackwood men aren't villains. They're prisoners of a debt they didn't create, serving a sentence they didn't earn. Sound familiar? It should. Because in the real world, we call that intergenerational trauma, and millions of people live inside it every single day. Then she read the part about the Vance bloodline, and the world tilted. The Keeper line carries the old fire, the purifying flame of the mountain's first guardians. Their blood can unmake what was made from sin, but the cleansing consumes the Keeper. Body and soul, nothing remains. Every generation, the Covenant sends a Keeper to Blackwood Hall. Every generation, the Blackwood heir learns what must be done. Every generation, the heir refuses. We would rather burn alive each night than ask an innocent to die for us. Lyra closed the journal. She understood now. All of it. Why he'd brought her here. Not to kill her, not to use her, but to protect her. From the Covenant. From the town that would gladly sacrifice her if they knew what her blood could do. He was keeping her alive by keeping her prisoner, enduring 147 years of nightly agony rather than let her be used as fuel for his freedom. In the far corner, draped in dust, she found the portrait. The man in the painting was young, mid-20s, black hair past his shoulders, eyes so blue they seemed backlit, high cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, a mouth caught between defiance and despair. He wore a dark coat buttoned to the throat, and his hands, long-fingered, elegant human, rested on a sword hilt. She recognized those hands. She had held them in the dark, felt the stone skin, the claws, but beneath all of it, these were the hands that had trembled against her palm. This was the man who carved heft. "I will not hurt you," into the floor of her room on the first night. "Oh," Lyra whispered to the painted blue eyes. "Oh, Valerius, you idiot." She pressed her palm against the portrait, canvas cold against her skin. The man in this painting was beautiful and doomed, and 147 years trapped inside a body designed to torture him every single night. And he had refused 12 times over 3 centuries to let anyone die to save him. She was crying again. She didn't bother wiping her face. Chapter 11. Valerius. She found the library. She knows. Valerius sits in the darkness of his study, the one room where the transformation doesn't touch, where the Sin Eater's influence thins just enough for him to think clearly, and feels the weight of Lyra's discovery through the bond like a stone dropped into still water. She read the journal. She saw the portrait. She knows what the covenant demands, what her blood can do, what he has spent a century and a half preventing. She knows he has been dying by inches to keep her alive. He should feel exposed, stripped. Instead, he feels something far more dangerous: relief. The corrosive, terrifying relief of a man who has carried a secret so long he'd forgotten it was crushing him until someone finally lifted the weight. The Sin Eater stirs. It has been restless for weeks, since the night Lyra held his hand, since the night she whispered, "Does it hurt?" with a compassion that tasted like sunlight on the entity's tongue. She'll try to save you now. The darkness purrs. They always try. The difference is, she can actually succeed, and it will kill her. Yes, that is rather the point. Valerius slams his fist into the desk. The wood splinters beneath the impact. His hands are already changing, the curse creeping earlier each night, the stone-black skin reaching past his wrists now. By dawn, it retreats. By dusk, it advances. The Sin Eater is growing stronger, and Valerius is running out of wall to put between it and the girl sleeping 2 floors above him. She is not a sacrifice, he tells the darkness. She is not a key. She is not a means to an end. Then what is she? The question catches him off guard. What is Lyra Vance to him? The girl who hums when she reads. The girl who ate the rabbit he caught and said thank you for dinner as if he'd brought her roses instead of a dead animal. The girl who held his monstrous hand and wept not from fear but from sorrow, his sorrow transmitted through the bond, felt as her own. Everything, he admits, and the confession burns worse than the curse. She is everything. And that is exactly why she has to leave. He remembers his father, not the broken version, not the man who shuffled through the halls in the final months, eyes vacant, muttering to people who'd been dead for decades. He remembers the man before. The one who taught him to ride, to read, to tend the garden, because even monsters should know how to grow things, son. The one who'd held the 7th Vance girl's hand on her first night and whispered through the bond, "I know you're afraid. I'm afraid too. But I swear, you will leave this place alive." 7 years, 7 returned girls, 7 fortunes in gold sent down the mountain. And then the 8th year alone, the curse clawing deeper with no one to anchor him, and the slow unraveling of a mind that had held for 63 years before the thread snapped. Valerius found him in the snow, barefoot, smiling. "Don't let it take you the way it took me," his father had said, clear for one final moment. "But don't let it take anyone else either. That's the only rule. Hold the line." Valerius has held the line for 147 years. And now a girl with honey-colored wool and steady hands and a laugh that sounds like something he'd forgotten existed is making him want to let go, not of control, but of the isolation he'd mistaken for strength. Because if he lets her in and the Sin Eater takes her anyway, he won't walk into the snow like his father. He'll burn the mountain down. Chapter 12. Lyra. The confrontation came before the mob. Lyra found him in the study at dusk, the one room the transformation didn't reach. She marched through the halls with the journal under her arm and her jaw set in what Nana called her mule face, the expression that meant she'd decided something and God himself couldn't unbake it. "I know what I am," she said to the empty room. "I know what the covenant demands. I know what my blood can do." Silence. Then you know why you need to leave." "I'm not leaving. Lyra, you've been protecting me, all of us. 147 years. Every night you let that thing tear you apart, rather than ask one of those 12 girls to. It would have killed them. Sharp. Defensive. The cleansing destroys the keeper. I wasn't noble. I was refusing to be a murderer. And that's not noble? No answer. Valerius, look at me. She caught herself, laughed, wet, frustrated. You know what I mean. A pressure shift. He was close. She could feel the heat, the displaced air, the vibration of a body held in check by will alone. You don't understand what you're offering. You're offering to die for me. I'm offering to save you. Same thing. Maybe, she admitted. Maybe not. The journal says the cleansing consumes the keeper, but it was written by a man who never saw it happen. There's no other way. I've had 147 years to look. She stood in the silence, feeling his despair through the bond, vast and old, an ocean of hopelessness that no single act of courage could drain. And she understood that this argument wouldn't be won with words. I'm not leaving, she said again. Quieter. You can't make me. You've never hurt any of the girls. You won't start with me. A sound from the darkness, half growl, half something she might have called a sob. You are the most infuriating woman I have met in 172 years. Good. Remember that. She turned and walked out. Behind her, so quiet she almost missed it, the bond carried one word, always. Chapter 13. Lyra. 2 days later, the mob came on a night the mountain itself seemed to be screaming. Lyra was in the library when she heard them. Distant at first, then growing. Voices and boots and the crackle of fire that shouldn't exist in a blizzard this severe. She ran to the nearest window. Below, winding up the mountain road like a burning snake, a line of torches cut an orange wound through the white darkness. At its head, Mayor Hargrove, unmistakable even at this distance, shouting fragments the wind carried up to her. Beast dies tonight. Vance girl's blood opens the vault. 300 years of gold locked in that mountain. Lyra's blood went cold, not the true purpose of the covenant, not the cleansing. Hargrove had twisted the ancient pact into a treasure map, with her blood as the key and Valerius as the lock. And let's take a second to appreciate how painfully realistic this is. Because this is exactly what happens in real life when people encounter something they don't understand. They don't seek truth, they seek profit. Hargrove doesn't care about the curse or the sin-eater or 300 years of suffering. He sees a story about blood and a locked mountain, and his brain immediately converts it to currency. Gold in the vault. That's all Lyra is to him, a withdrawal slip. That's all Valerius is, a lock to be broken. The real monsters in this story have never been the ones with claws. The clock read 11:43. 17 minutes until midnight. 17 minutes until the transformation, when Valerius would be at his most vulnerable. Half man, half monster, his human mind slipping under as the sin-eater clawed its way out. Lyra. His voice crashed into her mind so hard her vision whited out. The cellar. Under the third wine rack, pull the iron ring. It leads down the mountain, past the creek, 3 miles to the Miller farm. Go. Now. I'm not leaving, you don't understand. When the mob arrives and the transformation hits, the sin-eater feeds on their hatred, their greed. It's a feast. Once it feeds enough, I lose control. Permanently. I become what they already think I am. Then I'll stop them before they... You can't stop 30 men with torches and silver, Lyra. I'm not going to fight them. I'm going to show them the truth. Lyra, please. His voice cracked. Actually cracked, splintering into fragments that hit the bond like shrapnel. I have endured 147 years. I can endure more. I cannot endure your death. Do you understand? I'll survive losing my body, my mind, my humanity, but I won't survive losing you. Run. Her eyes burned. Her chest ached. And she knew, with the same cold clarity she'd felt the night Hargrove pulled her name from that jar, that she was not going to run. You stubborn, beautiful idiot, she whispered. I'm not running. Not from you. Not ever. The clock struck 11:55. Chapter 14. Lyra. The gates exploded inward at 11:58. 37 men poured through. Farmers and miners and shopkeepers with torches and silver-tipped weapons and faces made ugly by greed and firelight. Hargrove led the charge, a silver pike in his fist. Find the beast, he roared. Find the Vance girl. The great hall swallowed them, vast, echoing, dark. Their torches cut weak circles against the black. Shadows leapt on the walls as if the house itself recoiled. Then the clock struck midnight. The sound that followed was not thunder. It was deeper than thunder, a groan that registered in the bones, a tectonic shift as something ancient began to wake. From above, the staircase, the west tower, the transformation began. Every man froze. The cracking of bone, amplified by stone walls and vaulted ceilings, rolled through the hall like war drums made of breaking bodies. Wet tearing sounds followed, flesh separating, reconfiguring, the organic horror of a body unmade and remade. A man near the back dropped his torch. The flame hissed on the stone floor. Then Valerius came down the stairs. Not walked, descended. The way an avalanche descends, the way nightfall descends. Each step left claw marks in stone that had survived 3 centuries without a scratch. His breath came in furnace blasts that turned the air above him to steam. The torchlight found him. Lyra, pressed against a pillar near the hall's eastern wall, saw the mob see him. Saw 37 faces, men she'd grown up around, men who'd bought bread from Nana and tipped their hats at church, twist in identical masks of paralyzing terror. Even from the side, even in flickering light, she understood every warning she'd been given. Stone-black skin head to toe, the jaw elongated and hinged wrong, teeth that belonged in no human mouth. And the eyes, twin furnaces of molten gold burning in sockets too deep, radiating an intensity that went beyond light into something psychic. Hargrove looked. The mayor locked eyes with the Sin Eater for 1 second. Then he screamed, raw, stripped, inhuman, and his pipe clattered to the floor. His hands flew to his face. He collapsed sobbing, shrieking confessions that tumbled over each other. I stole from the Hendersons. I let Thomas die in the mine. I knew the beam was rotten and said nothing. I told Margaret her baby died, but I... One by one, those who met the golden eyes followed. Torches dropped. Men fell, clutching their skulls, drowning in the reflected weight of their own sins. Every lie, every cruelty, every buried evil erupting to the surface. And through the bond, Lyra felt Valerius disappearing. The Sin Eater gorging on the feast of human guilt, swelling with each confession, each shriek, his consciousness dimming like a candle in a flood. Run, his voice came, barely a whisper now. Lyra, for the love of everything. I can't hold it, it's taking me. The voice cut off, replaced by a roar that shook dust from the ceiling and cracked the eastern window. The man was gone. Only the monster remained. And Lyra Vance stepped out from behind the pillar. Chapter 15. Lyra. Let's not pretend she wasn't terrified. Her teeth rattled. Her legs moved not because they were brave, but because she ordered them to. One step, then another, the way a soldier walks into fire. Not from courage, but from the understanding that the alternative is worse. The honey-colored dress brushed the stone floor, and she was absurdly aware of the sound it made. A whisper of wool against cold rock, the softest sound in a room full of screaming men and roaring monster. I will not hurt you. Carved into the floor of her room, his first message, his first promise. Hargrove seized her ankle from the ground. Don't, he'll kill. She kicked free. Her eyes were locked on the thing at the base of the staircase. 8 feet of distorted shadow and burning eyes, claws flexing against stone, head swiveling toward her. Lyra. Don't. A voice so faint it could have been hope. My eyes, if you look, you'll see your sins. Every dark thought. I know, she said aloud. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised her. I know what happens. She stopped 3 feet from him. Close enough to feel the furnace heat. Close enough to smell the copper and ozone scent of a body at war with itself. Close enough to see the seams where stone skin met something softer. The fault lines where the man was still fighting to exist beneath the monster. The golden eyes found her. She didn't close hers. The world went white. Then dark. Then beyond either. The Sin Eater's gaze struck her consciousness like a battering ram, searching for buried guilt, hidden shame, anything it could amplify into the weapon of her own destruction. It found a girl who stole bread at 9 because her grandmother was hungry. A teenager who lied about a broken window. A woman who had wished, in her darkest moments, she'd been born into a different family. And that was all. No malice. No cruelty. No festering evil. Just the small, forgivable sins of a good person living a hard life. Sins so minor they dissolved on contact like snow on warm skin. The Sin Eater recoiled. For the first time in 300 years, the mirror of judgment had found nothing worth reflecting. The entity screamed, not through Valerius's throat but through the bond, fury, confusion, and something Lyra recognized with a shock. Fear. It's afraid, she realized, afraid of someone who isn't afraid of it. She raised her hand, placed it against the monstrous face, stone-black skin, distorted jaw, the cheek that in the portrait had held elegant bone and blue-eyed beauty. Her palm met the surface, and the cold was staggering, so intense it felt like fire. She held on. "I see you," she said. "Not the monster, not the curse. Him. Valerius. The man who carved messages in stone. The man who left wildflowers with the roots still on. The man who'd burned alive every night for 147 years, rather than let an innocent girl die to save him." "You're not a monster," she told him, and her voice cut beneath the roaring and the screaming and the sound of something ancient beginning to shatter. "You're the bravest person I've ever known." Light erupted from where her palm met his face. Not blinding, not violent. Warm. The color of honey, the color of her dress, the color of sun through curtains on a spring morning. It spread from the point of contact like cracks in ice, golden veins racing across the stone skin. The first piece fell. A shard no larger than a playing card broke from his cheek and turned to ash before it hit the floor. Beneath it, human skin. Pale, scarred, but human. Then another, and another. Down his neck, across his shoulders, along his arms. Everywhere the light reached, the curse shattered like glass. Stone became ash. Claws retracted into fingers. The impossible jaw shortened, reassembled into the architecture of a human face. Valerius screamed, not in agony, in release. The sound was chains snapping, a cage breaking open, the first breath of a drowning man breaking the surface. It filled the hall and blew out every torch, plunging them into darkness lit only by the honey-gold light pouring from the cracks in a dying curse. The last shard fell from over his heart, and the Sin-Eater's shriek cut through the bond one final time before slamming silent like a door shut forever. Dark, silent, still. Lyra's hand still rested on a face, but the face was different now. Smooth, warm, human. Her fingers traced the jaw from the portrait, the cheekbone she'd imagined in the dark. "Lyra?" His voice, his real voice, no telepathy, no interference, was rough and raw and breaking at every edge. "Are you? Can you?" "I'm here," she whispered. Someone found a torch, lit it, and in the wavering light that filled the great hall, casting long shadows across fallen men and crumbled curse and 3 centuries of accumulated suffering, she saw his face, both halves. Black hair, long and tangled and shot through with premature silver. Blue eyes, not golden, not burning. Blue, the impossible, depthless blue of the portrait, wet with tears. Scars mapped his features, thin white lines across his forehead, his cheek, his jaw, each one a record of a night when the transformation had torn something that didn't heal right. He was beautiful. Not despite the scars, but because of them. Beautiful the way mountains are beautiful, shaped by violence, standing regardless. He collapsed into her. She caught him, 5'4" in Nana's wool dress, staggering under the weight of a man who'd been carrying a curse for longer than the nation had been alive. She caught him. Because Lyra Vance had never buckled in her life, and she was not about to start now. "I see you," she said again. And this time he was awake and present and himself to hear it. His arms wrapped around her, human arms, scarred and shaking and warm. He buried his face in her hair, and the sound he made was not a word but something far more honest. The exhale of a man who has been holding his breath for 147 years. Epilogue. Lyra. The first spring without fog arrived the way miracles arrive. Unannounced, on a Tuesday, noticed first by a child. A girl named Maeve pointed at the sky and shouted, "Mama, where'd the clouds go?" And her mother looked up, and the grocer looked up, and one by one the entire town of Oakhaven saw an unobstructed sunrise for the first time in living memory. The gates of Blackwood Hall stood open, had not been closed since the night the curse broke. The iron, once black and pitted, had cleared somehow, as if even the metal was remembering what it looked like before. On the front steps, Lyra sat with her legs in the sun, a book on her lap and rosemary tea cooling on the stone beside her. The honey-colored dress she still wore, though Valerius had offered her a wardrobe full of alternatives. She liked the dress. It smelled like Nana. It smelled like before. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. Didn't need to. "Your grandmother is threatening to reorganize my library," Valerius said, settling beside her. She says the cataloging system is, and I quote, a crime against God and the Dewey Decimal. Nana had arrived 3 weeks after the curse broke, carried up the mountain in a cart driven by a neighbor trying to make amends. She'd taken one look at the estate, one look at Valerius, scarred, gaunt, blinking in sunlight he hadn't seen in over a century, and said, "You need feeding, both of you. Show me the kitchen." She'd been reorganizing things ever since. "Let her," Lyra said. "She's happy. She called me young man this morning. You're 172, exactly." Lyra laughed. Free and uncontained, the kind of laugh that doesn't know how to be quiet. His hand found hers. His hand, human, scarred at the knuckles, calloused from months of relearning how to hold things without claws. He closed his fingers around hers with a care that still stole her breath every time. "I want to show you something," he said. He led her past the kitchen garden Nana had tripled, past the stables being converted to a schoolroom, up a narrow path through the trees to a ledge overlooking the valley. Oakhaven spread below, the church, the schoolhouse, the street lamp someone had finally fixed, smoke from chimneys, children's voices on the wind. "I stood here once," Valerius said quietly, 130 years ago, watched the town, tried to remember what sun felt like on skin. He raised his hand, spreading his fingers against the sky, watching light pass between them. "I couldn't. I'd forgotten. And now?" He turned to her. Those blue eyes, the ones she'd first seen in a dusty portrait in a hidden basement, the ones that had burned gold for 147 years, found hers in the morning light. "Now it feels like you," he said. She kissed him. Not desperate, not claiming. Simple, honest. The press of lips that had been broken and healed against lips that had whispered comfort into a darkness no one else had dared to enter. Below them, the first wildflowers of spring pushed through melting snow. And in a patch of earth directly beneath where they stood, a cluster of honey-colored blooms that the old herbalist would later call Appalachian gold. A flower so rare it was thought extinct, the kind that only grows in soil recently purified of something ancient and terrible. Mrs. Ashworth, standing at the kitchen window, saw the flowers. Smiled. Strange on her eyeless face, but then, Ashworth had always seen more than anyone gave her credit for. She dried her hands and set the table for 3. So what did this story actually teach us? Because beneath the curses and the claws and the midnight transformations, this is a story about seeing people. Really seeing them. Not the mask they wear, not the reputation others have built around them, not the version of them that serves our own narrative, but the actual person underneath all of it. Lyra didn't break the curse with magic. She broke it by looking at something everyone else was too afraid to face and choosing compassion over self-preservation. And in a world that increasingly rewards fear, outrage, and judgment, that might be the most radical act of all. Thank you for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. It really helps support the channel. I'm already brainstorming my next story, but I'd love to hear from you. Is there a trope, a plot, or a character type you've been craving? Drop your ideas in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.